of Together We Thrive. We are here today with the beautiful Carris from Care Collective and Flow Vessel, and this is going to be a very, very exciting conversation. It's definitely the last, but it's not the least, where we're going to be talking about how to grow a business from nothing. And what I have personally found with growing a business from nothing is that it has made me personally be much more resilient, but I also have to adapt and change a lot more. There are pros and cons to both, obviously, and we will delve into that a little bit more. But first, Carris, I'd love to find out a little bit more about you and what you do. As our viewers know, vision statement is Together We Thrive, leading better business. So I wanted to ask you, what does better business mean to you?
Right, yeah. Thanks for having me, Rachel. It's been good to be here with you. I've been looking forward to jumping on this chat with you. And I love your mission vision statement. It's clear and it does kind of paint a picture of that growth as well. I do like the term better business. I think for me, I've been working in that kind of social enterprise space and having an interest in that area, and it kind of sits in that fourth sector where it's not government, it's not private, it's not for profit, it's kind of purpose for profit. And what I'd love, for the new normal, maybe Corona will kickstart this, is that all businesses do have a purpose that, it's not for profits trying to find a commercial arm so that they could be sustainable, because that's kind of the work I've come from. I've had most of my working career in the not-for-profit space, and, we're always writing grants, and, I've been part of writing a lot of grants and high figures in that space as well, but a lot of that's not sustainable. And what we'll get into later is Care Collective and Flow Vessel, and how that's our, we've got a product that's profit for purpose, but it's tied back to that mission. And I guess for any commercial business, whether it's your local cafe, you've got your coffee, I think Melbourne streets have a social mission, Railroads, that every business, whether it's a boutique or just a normal pure business, does have some sort of impact where they're providing, a social difference to whether it's a local community or something on the heart of the founders or the board. I'd love for, I guess, the term social entrepreneurship to just be called business, and everyone's doing their part to society to impact, whether it's a local issue or something bigger, national, like bushfires, or globally like Corona, taxing businesses to then provide funding for not-for-profits. It's just kind of this reallocation of resources, but the resources already exist. So it'd be great if it was just embedded in every business. I think that's what better business means to me. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, a girl after my own heart. I definitely have a big plan. Hope the future of business to look like, and that we disrupt the industry enough that has to be common practice and not unusual practice. And that goes for whether there's a social mission, but also how they look at the practices within their teams, their company culture, what they do with their profits, a very holistic model moving forward, and that would be my dream world, and the dream that I hope to be a part of.
Right.
And so tell me a little bit more about you and Care Collective and Flow Vessel, and how it came to be.
So I've been working in the disability sector for over 10 years under kind of research and development, doing different projects. And most people would have heard by now the National Disability Insurance Scheme, which is a new government initiative to support people with disabilities. So the previous model, pre-NDIS, was kind of, Joe Bloggs down the road, he has a disability, he's looking for services. He'd go on a wait list that the government provided block funding for. So in WA, we've got our big players like Rocky Bay, Ability Centre, Therapy Focus. They were kind of the service providers, and you'd stick your name on this wait list, and kind of whoever you got first was your service provider. And typically you kind of stayed with that service provider for 5 years, 30 years, possibly your whole lifetime, especially disability being a permanent condition. With NDIS, the whole premise around it was choice and control. So now you could choose which service provider you wanted. You could have speechy from one provider and OT from another and your support worker, and kind of have this mix and match. Theory, it's great, but I think there's this false sense of choice kind of being the pinnacle of, Western culture as like the thing you want choice, but you can actually have choice fatigue. People with disabilities or their parents, historically, there hasn't been the option of choosing and choice. It's kind of like which wait lists got moved quickly was who you went with. So you're asking people to make pretty big decisions about their quality of life, who haven't had the opportunity to exercise choice. And how do you make that informed decision to have the best quality of life for yourself or your child if you're a parent of a young person with a disability? So I guess Care Collective, I wanted to build a platform that was neutral, where we could curate all the services, whether it be events or therapists or local providers, equipment even, and for it to have, that social element of peer commentary and people recommending things. And so that choice became a bit more neutral. Information and knowledge would be available for people to build their capacity in their decision making. And like every kind of product or service that kind of serves a wider social issue, it's quite hard to monetize because it's something the government should be doing. And they have a big long list of here are all the service providers you can choose. But it's like an 11-page PDF. And for people who are blind, it's not even vision PDF readable. So, you've got your software that reads PDF. Yeah. Some people with disabilities can't even access the document. We found it quite hard to, there's different ways we could monetize it, and we're still working on that. But in the interim, we won some funding from HBF and RAC, which did some startup funding, and that really kickstarted how we came to be as a physical legal structure. Then a couple of years into the Care Collective journey, we tried some other kind of solutions along the way, and that didn't work, and we pivoted. In the interim, we wanted to have some sort of income stream that was, consistent and outside the disability sector. So we wanted to launch a product that was linked to disability. It was something that people with disabilities do use, but not that anyone would find useful. Something under $100, something that was gender neutral, something that people could easily buy more than one, and was fairly easy to post. And my good friend Peter Hall, I was actually on the phone to him this morning. He's got cerebral palsy, and he uses a wheelchair to get around, and he's always got a water bottle on his wheelchair tray table because he needs to stay hydrated. If he's got medications, he needs his water, and he needs a straw to consume his liquids. So some people, with the whole no plastic ban, there's a bunch of people with disabilities going, we actually need straws to live, like we consume through straws. So I've actually got one here because I keep mine on me all the time. It's just the water bottle, but it's got the features of like a push button lid, so people, whether it's arthritis or cerebral palsy or muscular dystrophy, can access it a bit easier. And I was actually talking to a client of Flow Vessel who just bought 3. It's just getting her to clarify her address, and I just said, how did you come across us? And she didn't want plastic because it's bad for you if it stays in the car. But all the stainless steel ones all had a screw top, and she doesn't have a physical disability, but she just said it's so inconvenient, and she found this after a lot of Google research and found it was useful. So the straw option allows you to keep your head neutral, and it's good for my husband loves it because he can be on the treadmill and not drink and pour all on yourself. Just it makes you think about universal design. So when you design for people with different needs or higher needs than, say, the average typical person, you're actually then just designing something that's functional. So, we probably would have used the toilet in the disabled bathroom before. The taps are easier to use. There's more space. There's the door. It doesn't need to be touched. Or when you design, I think it's called universal design. When you design for people with the most differences and needs, it actually just becomes a easier thing to use for UI. So it just made also people think of running for, or just how the world as we see it, a lot of barriers to people with disabilities is the social environmental design, which is designed for, you know, people who walk with two legs and are generally this height. So there's a lot of people that doesn't fit the mold. So yeah, I just want it to be a conversation piece as well, to raise awareness around universal design as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And so can I just clarify that Flow Vessel and Care Collective are connected? So
Yeah.
the profits from Flow Vessel go into Care Collective, is that right?
Yeah, so it's literally the same legal structure. So when you buy a flow vessel, it's literally going to Care Collective. At this stage, we thought it would be the easiest way, just because it was fairly new. I guess down the track, it might be something where we have two legal structures or change the company to more like a B Corp. But when we won funding with RAC, we needed to have a legal structure to receive our prize money, and just having a PTY Limited was the quickest off the shelf thing. So we're very open that we are profit for purpose, but having Flow Vessel, so the ABN is the same as Care Collective from a legal point of view. Just the branding and the business name is been registered separately. So yeah, that's how it legally sits at the moment, which we might change in the future. So lots of things to review.
Yeah, oh, well, I think business is a constant innovation and evolution, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love that you've given us, along with the journey, you've also given us a little bit of information of what you did. Obviously, today we're talking specifically about starting from nothing, and so you obviously managed to win a few grants or competitions.
Yeah.
And then you also continued to keep thinking outside the box. What do we need to do? We need to still raise more money. How can we do that? We can do that via a flow vessel. If you were to start again, would you choose a different model?
You mean a different business model, different path?
Yeah, would you choose a different business model? Would you have looked for investors, or would you have done anything differently?
I mean, it's a tricky thing about investors is that you have people invested with different motivations, and you just need to make sure those people align. The good thing about RAC was obviously it started the company, we won funding, and I was just like, okay, we are starting a business. I've never started anything before. It's like Google how to start a business.
Yeah.
But we got mentorship through it, and that was amazing. And it was just really a great eye opener. There were two other winners that went through like a bit of an accelerator program. So you had that peer cohort to go through. But the good thing with RAC was because RAC is a motor lifestyle travel company. I don't know if you have it where you are.
Yeah.
So the other winners were around, you know, travel and cars and that kind of area. But because ours was under the category Better WA, they actually gave us investment for no equity. So it was really just prize money. Around that year, when we received that money, HBF invested in us and they gave us 30 for 6%. And then later after that, I was accepted into Founder Institute, which is what I call like Shark Tank on steroids, which was like a 13-week crazy MBA where every week people get kicked out. Managed to graduate from I think 50 to about 20-something, went through the program. And I learned a lot through there. I think I legally co-founded quite a little bit too quickly. It was part of the Founder Institute or FI's requirement that the team that they put you with, you had to legally be part of the same company to go through the whole program. So we kind of wrote people in legally who were still in the company. So that would definitely change in the future. What was interesting after HBF and FI was we did a crowdfund campaign. So that was a great way to kind of not only raise capital, but I guess test the market in a very real way. Like, will Sally open up her wallet after watching this video and part with, you know, $40 or $30, whatever we're asking? I like that concept of people feeling like they're behind the creation of something. It's kind of like that power to the people where it's kind of owned by you, like without this movement or these people who believe in the product. It's not a couple of investors. And I'm not against more investment. I think business and the company is a little bit hard to raise money for, because Care Collective is a double-sided marketplace, and a lot of investors don't even want to borrow it. They're just kind of, oh, another one of you guys. A lot of our mentors were like, what's with everyone wanting to do a double-sided marketplace? I think, Uber and Airbnb give this kind of false narrative, like, oh, you don't own any houses, but you make money. You don't own any cars, but you have these drivers. But it is one of the hardest business models to create. We did pivot. We did start looking at more B2B and B2C solutions rather than double-sided marketplaces. I still do think there's a need for what we're doing, especially in WA. We're a little bit kind of disconnected from some of the technology and innovation over east. There's some great leaps and bounds over there, but when these companies from Sydney and Melbourne look at the WA market, we're just not attractive enough. So it is good to have something locally born and driven. Still very much in the early days of our business journey. I think I do want to stick with this kind of profit for purpose income stream, so we're not dependent on investors who then have a say in everything you do. Not that the investors in our case, told us what to do. They were very supportive. I had great mentorship through a couple of key people there as well. But I kind of like the idea of it kind of being neutral. I've even looked at, some places that do a crowd fund for equity. But yeah, like those kind of things excite me because they kind of challenge the normal paradigm of investing and ownership, and they're getting quite philosophical now. How business used to be done was this very transactional way, but I feel like in this day and age, things like Spotify or people mixing music in their own room and then sharing it to people at no cost, it really challenges the historic theory of economics and things like, raising equity through crowdfund. Every little bit of, people can invest from America or the UK or Australia for something, and you own a little piece of something. I think that's powerful. I like the concept and construct around that. So I haven't done it, but I've looked into it as well. And when I started Care Collective, there was no such thing as a social enterprise legal structure in Australia. And then a couple of years later, the B Corp structure to Australia, and that was a new thing. So that kind of changes from, a legal point of view. The government are recognising different ways of company structures. And there is that shift. I haven't really landed on what's the best or what's the worst. Like you said, it's ever evolving and adapting. It's just kind of, I think, always constantly reviewing and improving on your situation. Don't know if that really answered your question, Rachel.
Yeah, definitely. I loved it. You went deep. You went deep quickly, and I know I personally have done the equity for investment for the CBIN project, which is I don't know whether you would have seen social media possibly a few years ago now, the bins that they put into the sea that automatically draw in the waste. And they recently did, I actually had an interview to start off with, which mentioned about that the reason why CBIN originally got the traction that it did was because of the people, and the people that saw the idea and believed in the idea and helped elevate it and take it to the market. And his reasoning to turn into like a investment, a crowdfunding for equity model was to make it accessible for people for quite a small investment to be able to have a larger part of the say. But also what happens with that, which is something that I've been always very interested in what I think social media was maybe originally meant to be, was almost like community marketing. And so his idea is that, well, if you have people that are equally invested in the business being a success, then the people are going to be the ones like spreading and raising awareness, and you automatically have obviously a lot of people with a vested interest to help elevate the business. And that definitely comes back to some ideas that I've got about what marketing should be. And one of the reasons why I'm doing these interviews is because I personally believe that we can elevate each other's others' businesses by having these conversations and sort of cross-market throughout our communities to raise awareness for everybody and to lift everybody up.
See, where was the original company found? Was it an Australian initiative or an international one?
Sea-bin, yes, yeah. Most of the sea-bins are located overseas because they're generally around ports and where there are a lot of waste. So I believe that they found that Europe was one of the best places to actually place the sea-bins to have as much positive impact as possible. But I actually believe he is from the Byron Shire area. I believe that I'm in southeast Queensland, so I believe that he's fairly local. I remember seeing the bins ages ago and thinking that it was an amazing idea. And then when I heard this amazing interview actually by my mentor, Prue Chapman, that's from the Owners Collective, she has a podcast called One Wild Ride that she was talking to him about it, and he mentioned about this opportunity. And I just had it sitting in the back of my head. I think there was about 2 weeks to invest, and I just kept thinking, like, shall I do it? Shall I do it? No, don't. Like, we're coming into a time of like crisis. Like, don't make that. Don't spend money unnecessarily. It's like, no, you know what? I believed in this product when I saw this YouTube video, Facebook video years ago. It's an opportunity to actually help them and also be a part of this product that I really believe in. And so I feel great it was only a small amount of equity that I managed to put into it, but I think that there would probably be like thousands of people that are all similar minded, and I really look forward to seeing what we can do for the business and have an equally shared interest in cleaning up the ocean with these bins. So
that's great. And just even thinking with like Corona, and who knows what the economic impact, but it's going to change international deals and investments and trades and everything. But these sorts of things, again, it's that, well, the citizens of people in whatever country can still be part of economy in a new way. So it's great that you bit the bullet and got some equity in that and believed in something and stuck with it. That's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always played with that sort of stocks and shares and stuff like that. Not by no means an expert, but I just thought, you know what, why am I not playing with things that I actually really believe in? And it could definitely be a model that would have collective to that next level that I think would be interesting to explore. Obviously, there are lots of pros and cons. I've found that there are people that start from absolutely nothing, and generally service-based businesses are able to do that, and then they can slowly build up their businesses or their clientele, slowly start to pay themselves and create a sustainable business from a very low expense. So it's I guess easy for people to do, or very small micro businesses created off the back of as a part-time job or a side hustle or things like that. And then the alternative is to obviously have a large sum of money to whether it be in a grant form or investment form, actually injected into the business. And I think that there are pros and cons to both. To know what you think the pros and cons are. I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are behind the pros and cons to either starting from nothing or looking for investment at the beginning of some form of investment or grant.
I think, the good thing of having investment and money from the beginning is great. In a lot of ways, you have resources to execute your vision. I think at the early days, it was hard because I've only started putting a bit of my money in personally in the later years. I think that does have value because when it is your own hard-earned money, you would look at it a little bit differently than if it was kind of a prize money that you kind of won and got off the ground. There's definitely pros to having bootstrap because you know how lean your business can run, and just being resourceful and finding ways that as you grow and as your company scales, and that just becomes efficiencies in your process or your supply chain, that sort of thing. Obviously having investment right up front, you get that so much of business, and what I know I should do more of is marketing. It's such a massive part of business, and entrepreneurs, well, I don't know if I'm talking just on myself or other people, but we're so interested in solving the problem and finding the solution and creating that problem. And marketing is, telling that story, but, actually really data driven with, Facebook ads and cost per clicks. And we did a little bit of that. It's something I started really looking at again over this kind of shutdown corona period. But I guess the hard thing is with bootstrapping is that, like with me, I still have a full-time job, and it's just balancing time. A lot of my friends that were in similar scenarios did have a job. One other guy was developing an app and was like stacking coal shelves at night, and it is a lot of hours. You have to be disciplined about spending time doing it. So I think that is part of the journey. I think you need to, when you do grow, you realize how far you've come, or what you did in the early days, and it's just a good way to reflect when you do go through that path that's a little bit more difficult. This is the general path for most people, starting with nothing. It's not often, even the people that raise money to then have a salary, that's not really the beginning of the story. They had this idea, probably 6 years ago, then talked to their friend 5 years ago, then co-founded something, then started drafting something, and it was just a bit on the side and a bit of an idea, and then they might have got a beta off the thing. So yeah, it's not kind of like, if you are getting money or income, that's not right at the beginning of the journey. So I think every journey does come from nothing. You will just raise income through different ways. I don't think there's been many kind of 10x investments around in Perth. But yeah, they do exist, and it is exciting to see other people that you've been in the same cohort, start presenting overseas and mentoring in Silicon Valley, and just watching their growth and their journey. That's really exciting to kind of see other people's progress as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, oh gosh, what should I talk about first? I have to agree with you. I think that obviously there are pros and cons to both. And I think one of the major pros to having some kind of grant funding upfront is that it gets you in that flow, and someone is showing that they believe in you and believe in your product. And that can sometimes be all a entrepreneur needs to know, that they are on the right path. And it helps them create that flow and create some form of impact quite quickly. And when you do it the other way around, when, like you said, like if you're in a full-time job and doing a part-time job or something like that, it's very easy to get sidetracked, lose your momentum, or to just need a break because you've overworked yourself. And there's obviously that pro that you can really make, as a social entrepreneur, you can really make that impact sooner. Generally, if someone else believes in you and wants to invest in you, whether that's in time or money. I think the other thing is that, as you did briefly mention, is that there is some resilience that you get early on that you may see a bit later in your entrepreneurship journey if you were given a grant. And I think that sometimes, as you mentioned, that if you're given some kind of form of equity into your business, it relieves the pressure, but it also it can sometimes have the same momentum as if you are actually investing in yourself, whether it's you're investing in learning a new thing for the same time, compared to if you've been given free tuition or an accelerator program or something like that. The difference in goes into that program might be different, and the rate that you excel when your living is put on the forefront of that. It's an interesting one, and I don't think there's a one size fits all solution. Every business is so different. Do you have a thought process that you go through when you think, okay, now I'm going to look at grants, or now I'm going to look at creating a product? Have there been any similarities in the times that you have thought, okay, we need to re-look at our investment and our income?
Yeah, I think, well, with the bottles, I was going to comment earlier before I move on, what you were saying earlier about marketing and having that investment early. we did get such great coverage from winning those grants that it was a real springboard, and you don't really get that opportunities often if you bootstrap unless you kind of the news picks you up or whatever. It's definitely a pro having that, investment people kind of take you a bit more seriously. I guess I've always got, short and long-term goals. I've got a whiteboard here at the moment, actually, which needs updating about some like targets for the next, month and the following month with, Flow Vessel on across the top, and then the Care Collective as well. So each having their own goals, which definitely needs reviewing. But yeah, I think for me at the moment, some of our goals as well isn't purely monetary. Part of Care Collective is all like we want to employ people with disabilities as part of what we do. So Yvette, who's been like my main go-to person with Flow Vessel, she's blind and she helps with my market stall. So she either sets up with either her mum or a paid support worker. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's part of is our goals and our milestones and missions, and a lot of the money that generated just gone back into the business at this stage. I don't think I'd look at raising investment at this time. There's lots of legal stuff at our back end of our legal structure that needs cleaning up. That has been a little bit ongoing, slow. It's kind of like going with a flat tire. So that's been, I guess, my main focus, and it's kind of put a lot of strategy and investment and financial goals that I had, written down. It's been on pause until that legal side of stuff is cleaned up. A lot of the co-founders that came and went from the beginning of founding Care Collective and then going through Founder Institute, I think I've mentioned it before, they're still legally part of the company with shares, but they haven't been involved, I don't know, for 2.5 years. So it's difficult to move forward while that's still hanging over our heads. So it's on my to-do list today as well to follow up, because I've just had conversations with my old co-founder yesterday and on the weekend. And so that's been a massive, I guess, stagnant in the ass, to be honest. But, you got to do your due diligence and, looking back, I would have done things differently. But at that time, it was what was required through the accelerated programs and etc. So, I think when that's all done and dusted, that would just give me a kind of fresh lease to move forward with a lot more clearer strategy and focus. Yeah, because at the moment, it's really hard to actually move forward when the legal structure's just not right at all. So yeah, it's a bit stagnant in that capacity. But in terms of the product Flow Vessel selling, we're regular sales and great customers and good feedback all the time. Just got lots of bottles around me. And yeah, it is great. Like, we to that client today and asking her how she found us, and she was just like, I just did a lot of research and this seemed like the right one, and then you guys also have a social mission. It is great to hear consumers care about those things and they're making the decisions to also have an impact, like they want to be able to put their money into a product that does have an impact. So it's really heartening to see that people, that is part of their decision-making process of buying a product. So yeah,
absolutely. I think it's so important to make sure that you're communicating that sort of stuff, and like you have a social impact on so many different levels. Obviously you're looking at employment, but you're also looking at how you're actually designing your product, and you've got that knock-on effect of how the profits go into Care Collective and how it all weaves through. And it's actually quite a really inspiring business model. Should be more people that are looking at alternative methods and trying new things, and I think it's very inspiring to hear.
Sometimes it feels like a little bit too diluted, it's hard to like, it's so broad. And one of my friends in marketing, she's like, oh, you need to tell this story better, and I'm like, I know I need to do a lot of things, but just so she's offered to help me once I've kind of sorted out the legal stuff. It is hard to kind of, for the average person, be like, oh, well, how does a water bottle link to disability? It's so obscure. So yeah, well, I guess we have to just keep telling that story for it to through with the impact. But yeah, it is quite broad. But I guess we've got lots of different markets. We've got the fitness people, the eco people, the people. So with our product, I guess that there are quite a few sections that our product appeals to. It's just that narrative in the way that appeals to that customer avatar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the key things with marketing is that they say that a customer needs to hear from you about 13 times before they buy from you now. And so thinking
now with Facebook.
Yeah. And so thinking that you've said that message once, or like you've got that vision statement somewhere, or you've told one person, or you've done one post about the impact that you're creating, that is just not enough. Like you have to have it everywhere, and like consistency, and just thinking that you are basically launching your business for the first time every time you do a story or a post. Think that there's new eyes and there's new people that never heard of your business before, and what can you do to capture them and let them know about the amazing work that you're doing. Because I mean, I might be biased, but I believe that your water bottle over a water bottle that doesn't have the social impact, yours should win every time. And the only reason it wouldn't be is that if people don't know about it.
Good point.
And so don't let it stop you. Don't let it stop you at all. Yeah. You did mention a little bit about the legal structure, and I don't want to go into any specific, but is there any tips or advice that you could give to people in the future of like how to make sure that they go into the right legal structure, or make sure that they do look at those boxes?
Yeah, I guess with our journey, the journey from the beginning, when we won RAC funding, I just kept getting told by my mentors, like, oh, no one's going to invest in a one person founder company. You really need at least two, a second co-founder. I was like, hey, do I want to be my co-founder?
Yeah.
I did come across a great guy, Ben, actually won similar funding for a lot smaller award, trying to solve a similar solution in the aged care sector. And I mean, it's changed now from what it was before, but quite naively, I was kind of like, all right, let's go 50-50. I'd won funding, and I was in the process of setting up the legal structure, and we kind of just went 50-50. Later on, when we changed it and other co-founders came onto the share cap table, it was on what you call like a cliff. So just say that you're a co-founder, you get, say, 21%, but we'll do it as a cliff. So year 1, you'll get 7, year 2, you get 14, year 3, you get 21. And those years are based on output of your agreed activity into the company. So we did do that. For the second part of Founder Institute was to have all these co-founders part of it. So we did put some people on the cliff, like a 3-1-1 or whatever it was. That was all kind of new. It's still a process I don't understand probably as well as I should. But when that option was offered, made sense, and it's fairly normal in startup. Where people get kind of sweat equity for the work that they do. And that was useful. I think the other piece of advice I was given was that it's easier to move a PTY Limited to a not-for-profit rather than getting a not-for-profit to move to PTY Limited. So that was another reason why we landed on that structure. And in WA, not-for-profits are under some weird Associations Act of 2000 and something, where part of the process of starting up your not-for-profit structure is to advertise it in the paper for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Something very arbitrary, something like that was created back in the way back, what's even printed media anymore doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
But that was one, and it needed to be like advertised for a certain period of time, and we didn't have that time. We needed to have the legal structure ASAP. So PT1 is just off the shelf, off your local neighbourhood lawyer or accountant. So that's why we chose ours. I mean, looking back, I maybe would like to do a B Corp, but then it's like, this is actually so much work. Like as a startup, and even if we're looking now at potentially moving our current structure to a not-for-profit, which is an option that, is on the table, there's just so much governance. Like I've had all my career in not-for-profit, and I'm on the board of a local disability not-for-profit. There's so much governance, which is great. You need that. You need to be accountable to the ACNC, but that activity of meeting and minutes and agendas and of that kind of structure kind of takes away energy from building the product. And because we haven't landed on something amazing, a lot of our efforts still into the creating and pivoting and growing. We haven't focused on our efforts changing legal structure at this stage.
Yeah.
Maybe down the track it might be more of a necessity. At the moment it's fine to tick along how it is. Then you can also get your B certificate, so you might not need to be a full-fledged B Corp structure, but I do know that you can have a B cert, but that's also quite hard to maintain, and I believe you need to continue it annually, or it's kind of something that you need to renew on a fairly regular basis, which again is a good thing.
Yeah.
Can't just be handing out these. I think it depends on where you are on the journey, how much, like if we did have a team co-founder of 3 or 4, and one person had more of that time and energy to really focus on governance and structure, and someone else was marketing, someone else was tech, and the other whatever moment, because it's pretty much just me that you're looking at. I haven't dedicated the time to look at that as much as I should. A lot of the time I spend on it is just kind of operations of selling the bottles, getting your members into Care Collective, that kind of level. So yeah,
so many different ways that you can have a business that has a form of social impact, which you have, I think, mentioned almost all of them. And we have interviewed people from all stages of the business in this series, and there are a few things that we spoke about, and we did have a conversation about the not-for-profit sector, like the pros and cons of that sector. And I personally love the transparency, but it's a shame that it's needed because of potentially like, I guess, the past of not-for-profit and people using it for other tools other than to actually really help the cause, and how that has had like be truly transparent. But hearing about the advertising in the newspapers is a new one to me. I hadn't heard that one before. We did have one person had transitioned from a company to a not-for-profit, and the main reason being is that she still would do things in a way similar to a social enterprise, but being a not-for-profit just allowed her to have accessibility to so many more grants that she wouldn't have had originally as a social enterprise. And so that was the reason why she chose that, and it could very well be an option. And like you said, you've got lots to look at, whether you're one entity or two, and whether a portion of it is not-for-profit, or whether your whole thing's not-for-profit, or if you continue with the proprietary limited, and who your stakeholders are, and what their involvement's going to be, and what they're going to do to ensure the growth of your businesses moving forward. Because I think that there's a lot to consider. And I think, looking back from a few personal things that I've done in the past, I wish that I probably did have those thoughts or conversations earlier on about other businesses that I've had that haven't necessarily come into fruition. We've either stayed in that idea phase for too long and didn't really end up taking it to market, or we didn't have those conversations early on, as you mentioned, with co-founders, things like that. That came up in our conversation earlier about company culture, and if you've got a co-founder, actually having those really difficult conversations up front. Even, for instance, like if one of us had to be fired, like what and they said it was a very anxious going into the conversation, but they both felt quite relieved coming out of it, because they realised that they had that conversation before they even started the business, rather than reactive to when or if that conversation ever needed to arise.
Yeah.
Would you have done anything differently looking back, do you think?
Yeah, probably. I can't pinpoint exactly what it is, because I've learned so much along the way. I think just extending on what you're saying, the co-found match is really important. Ben having the aged care knowledge was really interesting. A founder that came on was Lynn, and she was more mental health. So that was a really nice trio. And like I was disability, Ben was aged care, Lynn was mental health, and then Paul came on board as a bit of a CTO. We didn't really get to like what we build. I end up building because Paul didn't want to invest so much time on a beta that was not properly tested. So I built like a pre-beta. But yeah, in the meantime, none of them have been involved. But I kind of felt, this mentors from different accelerator programs and the Founder Institute program that I was accepted into, yeah, they kind of said you can't co-found on your own. With my co-founders, like I married my first boyfriend. It's kind of like, oh, you've got interest, you get it. Let's get 50-50. And then you're like, honeymoon period's over, and you're like, oh, how does this actually work? Because everyone has competing demands on their life, and different. I didn't have kids. One of the others was a single parent, so I was happy to pick up some of that extra activity. Someone else was really busy, got married, and then so it is hard to kind of, I guess, having those conversations at what happens when people go through different life stages, because that's the reality. People have health or relationships, that sort of thing. That's really interesting. I think if the advice I'd maybe give my younger self, I don't know if this was touched in any of your previous conversations, but I guess being female in this space, this kind of glass ceiling, or you second guess yourself, or the experiences that you go through you think are unique sometimes to you yourself. But I think maybe women, we might talk about some of our fears and anxieties maybe a bit more openly, and the people kind of just have a different approach. I would second guess yourself, and of course I would have. I never started anything before and had this opportunity to jump head first. It would be naive of me to think I knew it all anyway. Interesting dynamic as well. I guess in the not-for-profit space it is quite female dominated, but a lot of the programs and accelerator mentors that I went through was all kind of more tech and male focused, and WA are doing pretty good trying to increase women's profile and experience in the kind of tech space. But yeah, that's just another dynamic that you don't really think about, but then when you do reflect on it, it does play into a lot of day to day. And people might assume I'm in my 20s when I'm definitely not. You know what I mean? People, they have assumptions, and you kind of need to break past them, or like prove. Sometimes you feel like you're spending so much time proving yourself rather than just getting the work done, letting the work speak for itself. And there's just some subconscious bias that no one's fully really aware of, but there's been some interesting studies that kind of prove it. But yeah, that's just another thing in the dynamic. I mean, that's just day to day. Even in my job, you have to. Those things are just part of life. But yeah, sometimes you do feel like you need to work a little bit harder to kind of make the same point that doesn't take as much efforts for someone who might be in the majority representation in the field that you're working in. So yeah, that's something else I'm sure that you've experienced at some point as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think I experienced it through most of my employment and the business owner. And yeah, I know what you mean, that people think that if you're younger than you are, or because you're female, or because you're not from here. Like, I'm originally from the UK, and they're just like little barriers that you don't necessarily see on the surface, but you do know
Yeah.
it's happening, because especially if you're servicing a local community and you're not necessarily from here, are they going with other people that they know or want? Like, you have to speak your values louder. Maybe personally, if I was giving people advice, I'd probably say really do like a values type activity, like with yourself, and also with any other people that you might potentially be working with in the future. And that probably goes for collaborations as well as co-founders and partnerships and things like that.
Definitely.
Because I think values really like make up you as a person, but they are so deeply ingrained into your business as well, If
Mm.
you don't have similar values, or if you've created a business with someone else that has kind of like diminished some of the things that really are some of your like greatest like values that they speak so loudly inside of you, but then you've created a business that doesn't flow those values
Mm.
through within the business. I think that I personally would have liked to have worked on that a little bit earlier in my. I think it would have helped me trust my gut intuition a little bit more. And I think it sounds a bit blasé to say, but I think gut intuition does really go for a long way. Me as a service provider specifically, there's sometimes like products, people that want like a type of service that I knew I shouldn't have done that because our values weren't aligned. I wouldn't have done my best job, because I think I gave an example in one of the other interviews, like someone that sells cars. I am not interested in cars in any way, shape or form. I barely know what type of car I drive, apart from the fact that the colour of it. Struggling to provide like a service to someone that their business just didn't align with me. It didn't light me up. It wasn't anything to do with me. I probably did them a disservice, because there would be a lot of other people in marketing and graphic design that love cars and like could really have helped that shine. And so I wish that I had really taken that deep dive into who I am and my values earlier on.
I've got no battery.
That's all right. I won't hold you up for much longer. Is there any other advice that you would give to people that want to start their entrepreneurship journey?
Oh, just give it a crack. I think so many people are, I had that idea, or husband's always like, oh, very inspired by, my entrepreneurial mind. And I said, well, I have an idea. And he had an idea, and I loved it. I was like, that could be something. And he sketched out some things and got really stuck on the name. Told some other friends, and they thought it was a great idea as well. But I think it's really hard to actually move from an idea to anything tangible, like something. And that's where your learning journey goes. So many people have ideas, executing it, pivoting, letting the data and the market teach you. And I think that in business, that is the greatest teacher, as the market spits you out pretty quick.
Yeah.
And you'll never get to test your idea. I had something else that I started and ended up selling for a nominal kind of amount for someone local. But yeah, having started a previous business and sold that, I was quite shocked within myself that that had value still, and someone actually purchased it for thousands of dollars when I didn't think anyone would.
Yeah.
You just learn along the way, and I think there's no better way to learn if they're serious about being an entrepreneur, is to just get started. Because the idea in your head, everyone has a billion jillion business ideas in their head, but not many people execute it. And let the market teach you. If it's not working, pivot, close it, sell it, try something else, keep going if you need to. It is. I wrote down that podcast, One Wild Ride. That is a good scenario, summary of what it's like. So,
yes.
But I enjoy it. I wouldn't really have it any other way. Like, there's still so much I want to do.
I have to agree, because I think one of my regrets is not doing it earlier, or like not giving it full force earlier.
Yeah,
absolutely. We'll finish with a quick fire round. Thank you so much for your advice. It's just a quick fire round, just a few questions just to finish off the interview. So, passion or purpose?
Oh, purpose.
Do you consider yourself an introvert or extrovert?
Extrovert.
Lead or follow?
Lead.
Think big or start small?
Think big.
Do you consider yourself a visionary or creative?
I'm quite half and half on this, actually, which my dad's very creative and my mum's very visionary, so I feel like I've got a good mix of both.
Awesome. Upskill or outsource?
Upskill to a certain degree and then outsource.
I totally agree on that one. You have to learn a little bit about what you're doing to know
Yeah,
what and how
what
to
you're
access
outsourcing,
properly.
exactly.
Yeah. And the final one, pivot or pause. What did you do in coronavirus?
Oh, neither. I kept going. I was just
Business
doing,
as usual.
yeah, trying to be. I did pause a little bit actually. We didn't pivot. I think it was such a unique opportunity for the whole world to pause. So I definitely did have that stop and breathe moment, but a good time to also get going and keep moving while everyone else is pausing.
Well, thank you so much
Ah,
for joining me today. It's been quite special having a one-on-one
yeah,
with you.
right, it's been lovely.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
really appreciate and value your time.
Yeah,
It's been lovely to talk a little bit more, and I can't wait to see what happens for Care Collective and Flow Vessel. It's
yeah, thank
very
you.
exciting.
Well, we'll stay in touch and love to connect with some of the other interviewees as well. Yeah.